Welcome to the Red Couch Talk, Adrian Tuescher. I'm so glad to have you here.
Angie, my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
And Adrian, I know, we're like, I am German, you're Swiss. We don't really like humor or fun facts, but can you share something about yourself that the audience won't be able to read in your bio or on LinkedIn?
It's a good question. It's become more difficult in recent times because I'm getting older and I have probably shared already a couple of fun facts throughout the past years on various channels and pitches and whatever. Some of which may be quite close to embarrassment, to be honest. If you go on TikTok, for example, and look at some of the KPMG employer branding videos. But talking about embarrassing, I might have one for you that I think I've really never shared with anyone. Some years ago when I was really stressed and had a hard time to sleep in the evening, I started to listen to rain sound or rain noise or whatever you call that.
Uh-huh.
So ever since, I have to admit that every night when I go to bed, I put on some rain noise and a timer and I sleep in with it. That might be a little weird, but it really calms me down. And it can even be funny sometimes because it happens to me like, say, twice a year that when I use my car and I plug in my phone there, like after 5 minutes, all of a sudden the rain noise comes and I go like, oh, it's starting to rain because I don't realize that it's coming from my phone. So that's not
And
sure
then
whether it's funny,
you
but at
have
least it's not very common.
then you have to be careful that you don't fall asleep while you're driving.
Oh yes, that would be not ideal at all. Yeah.
Yeah, because your body listens to the sound and knows, oh, now it's time to fall asleep.
True. But then I immediately switch it off, right? And the
Amazing.
alternative is that I hear the fairy tales that my daughter would listen to. That's not
Uh-huh.
bad.
Uh-huh. That's great. And it's not so unusual. Like I like to listen to my dishwasher.
Okay.
For some reason, it calms me down completely.
So feel free to come and use mine one day.
I know there are people who actually fall asleep to it's called like white noise or something. So
Okay.
it's
Well,
you're not that unusual. It is
okay.
it is a common thing. It's a thing. Yeah. Awesome. You're also a best-selling author, a global practice leader at your company, and a guest lecturer. And your focus is global employment and labor law. And I'm really impressed. When I read your bio, that immediately pushed me into complete imposter syndrome. So, Adrian, why do you do what you do?
That's a good question. I actually got a bit to it like a virgin to a child, to be honest. I was a pretty freshly graduate lawyer when I joined KPMG. And for lawyers, to be honest, the areas of immigration, employment, and the like are not the sexiest when you graduate freshly. So I joined KPMG as a corporate M&A lawyer, which I back then I found much sexier.
Uh-huh.
I did that work for quite some time, and then actually coincidentally got called into a meeting where a colleague of mine who did immigration and employment was sick, and had to jump in for her and present in front of a number of C levels who came to Switzerland to understand what it takes to set up a headquarter here on immigration and employment. Frankly, did have only little clue about what I was presenting. And then went back to my office or my desk to actually look up whether it was halfway right what I said. So I got attached to the topic and even found out that many companies might probably do something the way they shouldn't, and was able to write an article in Neue Zürcher Zeitung on that. And by that got even more attached. And so I ended up well, it's not meant negatively, but I got to immigration and employment. And what I really like about it, maybe particularly compared to corporate M&A, not saying this is a bad thing, I got some really valued colleagues who do that, but I love this mix between people and business needs that you have to reasonably balance. It's somewhat less business only driven. There is a lot of people and human topics coming into play, and I love to deal with people.
Well, that is amazing and good to hear. Because, sometimes when people have reached a certain career level, it might seem like, oh no, they're not so interested in people anymore. They're just interested in numbers. But I also think a lot of people, they make a switch at some stage. And like in the second half of our lives, maybe some of the things that were really important in the first half of our lives are maybe not so important anymore. And maybe values like, relationships or human beings may be more important at this stage or this season, as we sometimes call it.
I agree. And, like throughout my whole career, I tried to make myself believe that the numbers can follow the relations. So, I mean, you can focus on numbers, it might work. But if you focus on good relations and being a good person, a good leader, a good manager, you can also get to very good numbers without necessarily focusing on them only.
Ah. So do you think this is your secret of success? How did you get to the place where you are today in your career?
I hope it's not a secret. I hope that many tick like that, although you see some leadership geopolitically that is definitely living up to a different to a different approach. How did I get there? I mean, again, I was an unexperienced lawyer when I joined KPMG, and I felt like coming from university, hey, now I'm the man, I know it, I'm an attorney at law. And then I actually had the grounding, right? I mean, you join a company, you were asked to do stuff you actually learned at university, but you realize it's just very different in practice, and no one prepared me to do that. So I think for me, it was a long journey in the beginning of swallowing some false pride, of forgetting that and realizing that there is more than just technical know-how in this world. I mean, I gave, in my eyes, completely appropriate legal advice to mobility professionals, and they basically blamed me for being far too complicated, too legalistic. And in the first instance, I felt offended, but then I started to understand them, because it's about much more than being technically excellent. It's about giving them the right customer or client experience and help them doing their job right. And this is not just answering black or white questions technically right. So for me, it was a lot about getting to understand how my advice embeds into, well, the further challenges that the recipient of my advice has.
Mm.
And when I started to understand that, I could start to teach younger colleagues to do the same, start build up a team, also pass a lot of my know-how on.
Mm.
By that, I could climb the career ladder, and one step led into the other. And I'm still very happy with what I do. I have a lot of very interesting young people around me who nowadays teach me a lot too. So it's not only me passing on experience to them, it's also them teaching me in a lot of stuff, not only digital stuff, but also other stuff. And I do enjoy that a lot. So, yeah.
Great. So you also always had this, you were starting to write books, early articles, as you mentioned, but you also always had this teaching ideal, and you are also a guest lecturer. So what is maybe something, if you think about the more younger generations today, something you would advise a younger version of you when they, just come out of university, for example?
Well, know that you have a great backpack to explore the world, but also be humble enough to understand that you have to learn a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Don't judge too heavily on the elderly generations. They have reasons why they behave like they behave.
Mm-hmm.
So as you do, and try to find a good compromise between the old time and the new time, and what you bring with and more experienced people bring with. That's very generic, not so much now related to
No,
our.
I understand. And I think it's a really important topic, especially when we think about younger generations nowadays. They very often think, they have already understood everything and might be a bit too judgmental, a bit too fast. And sometimes it would help a little bit to listen and to learn and to understand before making judgment, I think.
And if I may, my second big advice, or actually not would do give to all my juniors at least, is, and I think it's down to the multi options that those people have nowadays. We have so many options, right? I could basically choose between, I don't know, 3 different subjects at university that you would reasonably or normally take. And nowadays you can study everything, and you can have so many different jobs with so many different job titles, which weren't even around when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
So those people struggle with all these options, and then they decide for one.
Mm-hmm.
And when they approach the first stumble block, or the first, I tend to say, hill or mountain, and they start climbing it and it gets exhausting, they give up, because they naturally think, hey, I probably have taken the wrong option. So they start jumping from option to option, which is not totally right. But I advise everyone to overcome at least one stumbling block, at least climb at least one hill, just to see that there is more hills to come, but also get the satisfying feeling of having climbed the first one. because that's so important. If you always run away when obstacles come, you will never make it, I guess.
I I agree with you. And when we think about global mobility professionals, you already said something about, you have to support them in having a good client experience. At the same time, sometimes global mobility managers, they can't really deal with getting too many different technical advices from the different areas, tax, social security, immigration, employment law. So somehow, we also have to reunite all the issues and find one good solution
It's not
for
easy.
them. And that brings me to another question about global mobility education. And I'm sure you've thought about this already a lot because you're also teaching in the field. But what do you think is one of the things that global mobility managers need to understand better? And maybe also a thing that right now we neglect when we educate global mobility professionals?
As another very good question. First of all, I'm kind of glad to see that in Switzerland there has been an increasing trend towards mobility educations. I mean, I don't know how many years ago, not so many. There was merely nothing, and you could also feel a difference in maturity or professionalization in the mobility space when you compared Switzerland against many neighboring markets, or even more when you looked across the sea. So I think that's very good, and we can feel that when we work with mobility professionals that they're really getting more professional.
Yeah.
What I think is probably, and it's probably not any different for a mobility manager as it is for a legal advisor. So you need to probably help them as an educational institute to better understand their role in the business. I
Hmm.
mean, of course, they need to have a not a rock solid. They don't need to be experts, but a solid understanding of what you touched on, like social security, immigration, tax, and all that stuff, and a bit how it plays into each other, where the risk lies and stuff. But other than that, I think they also need to understand that they're ultimately somehow fitting into a strategy, a HR strategy, a talent strategy, or even a whole strategy of a group or a firm, because that very much helps to understand the needs of the stakeholders that come to them to the mobility managers with their asks. And what I find particularly challenging there as a mobility manager is that you have, on one side, you have your business, your firm is an important stakeholder, and then you have the assignees. And then again, this what I like so much, this business versus private stuff comes into place. And you also have to reasonably take position for the firm when it gets too much private on the end of the assignee. All that things I think is important that mobility manager learn that, and also get brave enough to stand up for that and defend it against the big guys in the firm if they come and say, this is not an issue, it's all possible, just send someone tomorrow to Peru. It's not that easy, right?
Hmm. I once referred to this as the global mobility dilemmas
Mhm.
because we sit in the middle of all of these different interests and y- there's could be also different interests between the manager of the global mobility manager who might be a compensation and benefits person,
Right.
then the talent leader, the business leaders, and also the expats and the expat families.
Right.
And sometimes it's this dilemma is really to trying to reconcile all the different and opposing views on how something should be handled. So there's a lot of diplomacy required in this job.
I fully agree, and also storytelling to some extent, right?
And
You need to
storytelling, yeah.
you need to convince some people who genuinely think they know better, that you know better, although you might be on a more junior level or grade in the company, and also, I mean, ultimately, it's also a bit about protecting yourself, because when something goes wrong, it easily falls on your own feet. So you have to find a diplomatic way to tell people that you told them, and be bold enough to address some risks without running the risk of being perceived as business unfriendly, if that is a proper English word.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question that is not strictly about your journey, a bit more about the current situation. How do you how do you feel the current geopolitical situation has impacted immigration?
Less than COVID did.
Oh yeah, okay.
I think, I mean, of course, the war in the Ukraine had a big impact because it came fast, just like COVID, and it had a material impact very quickly, particularly for those who wanted to leave Ukraine and sometimes, or many also Russia. And also the neighboring countries who kind of faced these waves of immigrants. So that was for Poland, for example, was a big challenge. But I think like out of COVID, people were much more aware of restrictions that may come out also more or less overnight in various countries on the immigration side of things. So that's where I particularly felt that the whole mobility industry has become much more professional, which is why we never saw that kind of panic now where we see other, unfortunately, fires in the world as we did in the COVID time, which was really exceptionally hard for all of us, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also with the working from anywhere, I mean, from various aspects, mobility has become more important in the HR world, I would say, or in the business world, and that also helped to create awareness, which makes it easier to react fast if things change than it did in the past. Also, the C-level, the board, they're more aware of these topics since COVID than they were before, and that helps everyone to move fast.
That is obviously one of the advantages of those tough times and this big valley of tears we went through with the pandemic. Absolutely. Yeah, I never really thought of it that way, that it also increased the visibility and put mobility more on the map for many C-level executives. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Amazing. Now, do you have anything exciting coming up in the next few weeks that you want to tell our viewers about?
Well, of course we do. I mean, as KPMG, we always try to be on top of things and provide a lot of good thought leadership pieces to all of you. I mean, some of you might know that we do have very established mobility roundtables at KPMG. We might not be the only ones running them, but we try to do it somewhat differently and particularly bring together all the disciplines. So we would normally have experts from the various fields or expertise on the table and then moderate a peer discussion with mobility professionals. We do that on a bi-monthly basis. And have very, very, very insightful discussions on hot topics like, and I know this is the buzzword, but people even in HR or mobility currently want to talk about AI, but there's also other stuff, it's not just AI, but then we have this kind of conversations all together in a group of typically 20 people, which I consider not too big to have a proper conversation, and our participants normally value it a lot. So I can only warmly invite everyone to connect with me on LinkedIn, unless you haven't already done so. Watch out for those invitations and please feel free to join us on site. I'm a big fan of in-person events when it comes to conversations among a larger group of people. So yeah, watch out for that, and it will be an honor to host you.
So if one of my listeners would be interested in the event and they refer to the Red Couch and contact you directly, is that something that is okay?
Absolutely. I love to be contacted directly. Okay. As I said in the beginning, I like people, and that's how you get to know.
Yeah, I will send a few people your way, I think.
Yes, please. You're more than welcome.
And we will also obviously, link to your LinkedIn profile in our show notes here. Adrian, yes. Thanks so much for coming. It's been a pleasure to talk to you again, and I look forward to seeing you again shortly in person.
Thanks for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you again, and thanks everyone for your attention. Catch up soon then. Happy weekend, yeah?
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.